Hey, good evening, everyone. We are ready to start the Planning and Zoning Board meeting today. It is Thursday, July 22nd. The time is 6:34 p.m. We are going to go ahead and start. Let me read a caveat first. If you wish to speak on any item on this agenda, please complete a public comment card and provide it to the Planning and Zoning staff. Cards must be submitted prior to board discussions of an item. Thank you. Let's start with a moment of silence and our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be conducted by Board Member William Wiley. Thank you. Let me start by greeting all of our visitors, our guests, and our viewing residents this evening. Item number 2. Let's start with the roll call for a quorum.
Anthony Brown. William Wiley.
Here.
Margaret Shepard. James Gallen.
Here.
Renee Burgess. Evelyn Harris Clark.
Present.
Moeti Nubi.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And because we have board members who are not here this evening, tonight we are going to give voting rights to Moeti Nubi, who is the first alternate, so he has complete voting rights this evening.
Madam Chair, will you be taking a vote?
Oh, sure, yes.
So move.
So moved. Okay, all in favor, so moved. Let's have a roll call.
James Gallen.
Yes.
William Wiley.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
unanimous vote.
Okay. We have had an acknowledgement of board member absence notifications already. And let's go to additions and deletions to the agenda. I just have a slight change, and that is I'm just going to move public comments right up under item 8B, that once we have completed the due diligence on that item, I will open up to public comments if we have any. Also, for the next item 9, we are going to have a short presentation by Board Member Moeti under workshop items. Okay. Do I need to take a vote on those changes? Do I need to take a vote on those changes?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. May we have a roll call, please?
James Gallen.
Yes.
William Wiley.
Yes.
Moeti Nubi.
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to item number 4, additions. Oh, no. Oh, we did number 4. Okay. All right. Any disclosures by board members regarding today's agenda? Seeing none, we're just going to go ahead and move on. And we have an adoption of the agenda, so we've already done that, correct? So I don't have to do that now.
Correct.
Okay, so we're fine with that. So we're going to go on to item 6, approval of the minutes. Everyone should have had an opportunity to receive the minutes of our last meeting via email and read them. So may we have a roll call for approval of minutes?
So move.
Is there a second?
Well, second.
James Gallen.
Yes.
William Wiley.
Yes.
Moeti Nubi.
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Okay. Is there any unfinished business by the staff, by the board? Seeing none, we'll go on to new business. Okay, all right, new business.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Mary Savage Dunham, Assistant Director of Development Services. Our first item is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, amending Chapter 31 of the City's Code of Ordinances entitled Zoning, Article 1, in general, Section 31-1, Definitions, by amending the definition of height of building to read, height of buildings means the vertical distance measured from the minimum required floor or 18 inches above the crown of the road to A, the highest point of a flat roof, B, the deck line of a mansard roof, C, the average height between eaves and ridge for a gable, hip, and gambrel roof, or D, the average height between high and low points for a shed roof. Parapet walls intended to provide screening for rooftop mechanicals may extend not more than 5 feet above the allowable height of a building, providing for severability and conflicts, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date. So this is application ZA 2106, height of buildings. And this is a staff-initiated text change. Actually, both of your items tonight are brought forward by your staff. Why are we bringing this forward? Well, for a number of reasons. The existing definition was adopted in 1983, and it is outdated. As you know, over the past, since 1983, between climate change and sustainability, these wild weather events that we're having, we really have learned a lot about how to be more resilient in our coastal construction and our development practices, and our code needs to really catch back up with us. Our existing definition is not responsible to the perils of flooding faced by the community today. In addition, there's a new state building code and a new flood map, and they both require a higher minimum floor height for structures at risk of flooding. The building code requires a 1-foot freeboard above the base flood elevation for the minimum finished floor elevation. So all of these requirements with the flood map and the building code that are saying, listen, we know that the water comes up to this minimum flood elevation, so your bottom finished floor needs to be a foot above that. What that's doing in areas that are at risk of flooding is resulting in houses or structures where the first habitable floor is higher than the surface of ground. I'm sure as you drive around, you've seen buildings like that, either on piers or with the flow-through crawl space beneath them. It becomes challenging in development because we also have these limitations on heights of structures. So you have buildings that are being forced to be higher by construction, and we have these height limits, and then this definition that we're proposing to change still measures the height of the building from the ground or the crown of the road, 18 inches above the crown of the road. So we might start measuring a building down here, but the base flood elevation is up here. So they're already being discounted several feet of building height. So you combine all of that together, and we're really condensing the building envelope, and it's impacting development. So these additional elevation requirements are in a place to help development be more resilient by requiring the minimum floor elevation to be at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. But when we combine that with the maximum building height requirements in the code, the result is a constraint on the development potential of those parcels. So in commercial development in general, and particularly in flood-prone areas, the mechanicals are being located on the rooftops also. And that makes sense for protection from flooding. More and more frequently, single-family dwellings in flood-prone areas are also doing the same, or they'll elevate their mechanicals on a little podium. But if you think about as you travel with hotels or commercial buildings, it's not uncommon to see the mechanicals on the rooftop. Typically, if it's not a flood-prone area, they're just doing that because they're ugly and they want them out of sight and they want to maximize their floor area. But in our flood-prone areas, it's because it's safer to put them out of where they'll be destroyed by the water. But it doesn't look good. And as people are spending millions of dollars improving their properties, then we have these mechanicals on the rooftop that you can see as you're walking around your newly developed area. It would make sense to screen them. And many communities require those mechanicals to be screened. It's more pleasing. However, again, right now, our previous code doesn't exempt that screening from the calculation of building height. So if people want to screen their mechanicals, we would count that towards the height of a building. So again, it's a constraint on the project. This code revision, as we've read and we'll talk about again, proposes to exempt that screening from the calculation of building height so that we don't punish people for constructing a building that's more pleasing to the eye, basically. So land development codes and best practices typically require those mechanicals to be screened from view to mitigate the impacts on abutters and to result in a more pleasing appearance for the structure. For this reason, our proposed language specifically excludes parapet walls of not more than 5 feet in height from the overall building height calculation when they are installed specifically for the screening of rooftop mechanicals. And we're lucky we have our building official here with us today, Mr. Grimm, and he states that the mechanicals on these rooftops are typically 4 feet tall, sometimes a little taller than that. And that is why we went to the 5-foot height for the exclusion, to make sure that there wasn't screening and you could still see like the top of a mechanical unit. So as Riviera Beach experiences continued growth and redevelopment, the built form will become more aesthetically pleasing because we're taking proactive steps to screen these mechanicals and kind of the ugly side of the building. So for all of these reasons, staff recommends approval of the application ZA 2106 for an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, amending Chapter 31 of the City Code of Ordinances entitled Zoning, Article 1 in general, Section 31-1, Definitions, by amending the definition of height of building to read, the height of building means the vertical distance measured from the minimum required floor or 18 inches above the crown of the road to A, the highest point of a flat roof, B, the deck line of a mansard roof, C, the average height between eaves and ridge for gable, hip, and gambrel roofs, or D, the average height between high and low points for a shed roof, parapet walls intended to provide screening for rooftop mechanicals may extend not more than 5 feet above the allowable height of a building, providing for severability and conflicts, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date. So that's a lot of words. What it comes down to is that we're asking you to amend the definition for how we measure height of building. And really the two main changes are, and it's in your packet, I gave you the red line so you could see what changed. Right now, our definition measures the height of building to read the lesser of the minimum required floor or 18 inches above the crown of the road. So we're taking out the words the lesser of. And the other thing is that we're putting in that language that's excluding the parapet walls from the calculation of building height so that we don't penalize applicants for screening their rooftop mechanicals. So it's a lot of words for not a lot of changes, but I think that as we move towards a more resilient and flood-proof society, and we want people to continue reinvesting in our community, we need to look at ways to meet several masters. And so that's the intent of this change. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm very grateful that the building official is here too, because he's very familiar with how we do this as well, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. So this is the completion of this particular portion of the agenda. This is the completion of this particular point of the agenda.
I am done with this item A, the first item of new business. We're done, and we're hoping that you will favorably recommend for approval.
Okay, so we're going to open up the floor to board questions, and we're going to start with Mr. Gatlin first.
I have no questions.
Okay, then I'm going to defer to, well, I think I'll defer to myself. Okay. You mentioned exempt screening on roof, which hides the mechanicals, which will ordinarily be about 4 feet tall. And that is going to be exempt from the height requirement. So it's not going to be included from where the starting point of the foundation is to the top of that building, excluding the screening on the roof.
Correct. It's
Okay, so my question is, in addition to that, what is our city height requirement? Does that vary from building to building? What is our highest height requirement?
That's a very good question. It varies from zoning district to zoning district. Residential districts, the height requirement or the height limit is typically 35 feet. In some districts, if you're putting an enclosed parking garage under a structure, perhaps you're building a 4 or 5 unit condominium, if there's a parking garage enclosed under it, you get another 10 feet. So in that district, the limit is 35 feet. You could go up to 45 feet. But however, in some of our other districts, we allow 200-foot or 20-story buildings, like in our RM20. In those zoning districts, they already build in an exemption where you can have another 20 feet on top of that 200-foot building for antennas, that type of thing. So those larger kind of high-rise or resort developments, the code already anticipates that there'll be some additional equipment on the roof. We're finding that this will probably provide the most relief for your residential units, some of the bigger houses that are being built, or maybe a 4 or 5 unit apartment would require this relief. But that's a great question.
For the condos, or even the parking garage with units on top, is it part of the applicant who's going to develop this type of project? Is the screening mandatory? Is that what we require from the city, that when they build this sort of structure, that it's mandatory that there is this screening on top if the mechanicals are on top, or is that optional?
So that's another great question. Right now, we don't require in the code to screen that, although that you may see that coming in a staff-initiated change for your discussion. However, as you know, staff reviews these projects, and one of our staff comments typically when we'll look at a project is we think about how do we mitigate the impact on the abutters. And what are those impacts? Noise, sound, light, view. And the best way to mitigate impacts is either by screening. On the ground by landscaping, on the rooftop with maybe a lattice or an architectural feature like a parapet wall. But if I were to tell somebody who's already forced to build their building higher because of the flood zone, and they need, elevate the minimum, you have 45 feet, the ground's here, well, your minimum floor elevation has to be up at 6, you have to go to 1 foot above that for the building code, so now you're at elevation 7, you already lost, really 7 feet out of your 45 feet. So when staff says, we'd really like you to screen those mechanicals, first of all, it's not required by code. Many applicants are very willing to work with staff to come out with the best project. But if there's no available height left, and it means that, well, if I put on a 4-foot screening to screen my mechanicals, I'm going to lose a livable story. And now all of a sudden, instead of 5 apartments, I have 3 or 2, that's when people will typically look back in staff and say, if it wasn't included in the height, I'd be happy to do it, but here's what the practical ramifications are. And so those are the conversations that we have, and that's why we suggested that in this amendment we exempt that screening, because as people invest in their properties, we want them to look the best they can. And that screening for mechanicals, it will screen the view, but it can also muffle any kind of noise that there might be, any lights. So it's really in our favor, it's in the neighbor's favor. Right now, it's not optional. If I don't penalize them for doing it, I'm more likely to get people to say, it doesn't count against my height, I'm happy to do it. And so that was part of the genesis for this.
I think it's kind of a catch-22 in the development process of any sort of developer, because they're always going to come across some sort of building code regulation, either mandated by the state or mandated by the city or the municipality. I mean, for example, unfortunately, we saw the tragedy that happened in Miami because people went around those sort of protections, and unfortunately, look what we have. We have many buildings, I'm pretty sure, in that same sort of condition. And I think as people, developers, municipalities, if we move forward, you have to look at either safety or you lose a floor. And I'd rather see that you lose a floor than to lose lives. And I'll give an example that the condo that I own in another part of Florida, our mechanicals were on the ground, subject to flooding, subject to all of the conditions of the ocean, and so were the rods that supported our building. And we took the initiative after the hurricane about 10 years ago, where it exposed the rotting and decay of, I guess it's the bob wire cables that stabilize our buildings. They dissolved. And any moment, any of us residents or guests, that building could have fell on top of us. So sometimes we just have to look at things that economically it may not be in the best interest of the applicant, but in the long run it would be, but it's also good for our city. And let's see, I think I had one other question. You answered the height requirement. And, oh, back to the screening. Is there, once you have screening on top, mechanicals on top, and not only, we're in a hurricane path. We've been fortunate we haven't had one, but a hurricane could come to us at any time. And I would think that the screening is a protective barrier that if mechanicals are on top and for whatever reasons a strong Cat 4 or 5 came through and those mechanicals aren't that secure, that screening would be a barrier? And do we require a certain type of security, protection, strength barrier as it relates to the screenings?
Well, that's a two-part question, another great question. This code revision anticipates that the screening will be parapet walls. So the walls are actually a fixed architectural feature. As far as the mechanicals being anchored onto the rooftop, I would presume that they are. I don't know if you can speak to that, Mr. Grimm. This is our building official, Mr. Grimm.
Hi, state your name for the record and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Michael Grimm. I'm the building official, City of Riviera Beach.
Okay.
Yeah, all mechanical equipment that's installed on rooftops is designed to withstand the current wind loads. So they are designed to withstand the hurricane forces. They must give us product approvals for their anchoring, and we inspect that. So they are designed to withstand the wind.
Okay, I'm not an architect. Could you describe the material that the screens are made out of, for example, for the audience?
Well, And here we're talking mainly about parapets, which would be structurally component of the building. If your building is of a concrete, it would be concrete and rebar in the parapet. It would be designed to meet the wind loads and the strength requirements of the building. On much smaller buildings, if you just allow screening, sometimes breakaway screening like a lattice, that is not required to meet a wind load. It is designed to break away and be inconsequential in a hurricane. But so there are some lightweight vinyls, and so it depends upon the situation of the screening, whether it's a screening or a parapet.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Wiley?
I would like to say, well, first of all, welcome, sir, Mr. Grimm, Michael Grimm.
Yes.
Okay, just make it understand, because I never knew who the building official was, so welcome.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, again, I think this is a very good idea, especially when it comes to the flooding issues and any safety issues, like you see what she spoke of about the hurricanes and everything. And I think it's very good that the city now is doing such a great job with making these the proper adjustments and make these proper amendment changes. And I strongly stated during some city meetings before that we need to go in and redo a lot of things, because some of these policies or some of these ideas were 20 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old, and they're not relevant today. And again, we do not want to have a company or organization back away because of something that happens into where, okay, I can't do 5 and I have to do 3, but 3 may not be financially beneficial for them. So in this situation here, we made that a proper adjustment to encourage them to come in and still also stay up under the safety ramifications and everything. So thank you. That's a very good idea. And I think that we need to start doing a lot more of that with a lot of the policies, not only with this, but with a lot of other things in the city of Riviera Beach, and start redoing our policies and making them more up to date. So thank you.
Yes, Board Member Moetti?
I'd just like to co-sign on what Mr. Wiley said, is that I think this is a great effort. I definitely would like to see more of this. I think the more that we look at, like our processes, it will increase the likelihood that we'll get more interest in the city. It shows that we actually are willing to respond and upgrade. So I definitely, I really applaud the efforts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will tell you that under Mr. Sermon's leadership, the Development Services Department, we really are starting to work through the code. So you'll start to see us more and more frequently bringing forward staff-initiated changes to the codes and the policies. So we appreciate you supporting and working with our efforts, and I suspect you'll see Mr. Grimm more too. So we thank you.
Okay, and that concludes all of the questions and everything? Okay, great. So I would ask for public comments.
None, Madam Chair.
Okay, we don't have any public comments. So at this point on item number A, we're going to go ahead and have a vote by our board. Would one of the board members make a motion to adopt the ordinance change of item A?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance of, for the Land Development Code ordinance of Article 1, Section 31-1.
May we have a second?
Second.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Moetti Newby,
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Okay, let's go on to agenda item number B.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item B is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, amending Chapter 25, of the city's Code of Ordinances entitled Floodplain Management in order to specify elevation of manufactured homes in flood hazard areas, to provide criteria for accessory structures in flood hazard areas, to repeal Chapter 25 Exhibit A, providing for applicability, conflicts, severability, and codification, and providing for an effective date. And for this item, I'm going to ask Mr. Grimm to take the helm and present it.
Thank you. Once again, Michael Grimm, building official, Riviera Beach. This item is concerned with floodplain management regulations. And to give you some background, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, runs the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP. The NFIP provides the vast majority of flood insurance throughout the country. Your typical homeowner's policy does not cover flood. In order for a property to be able to get flood insurance through the NFIP, the community that the property is located in must participate in the NFIP. Participation typically involves adopting and enforcing required floodplain management regulations, and also being audited with community contact visits from typically a state agency that cooperates with the NFIP. That agency in Florida is the Division of Emergency Management, State Floodplain Management Office. Now, the City of Riviera Beach does participate in the NFIP, and our current floodplain management regulations are based on the model ordinance that was generated by the State Floodplain Management Office. There is also another program called the CRS, Community Rating System. That program provides discounts on flood insurance. The city receives a rating for implementing regulations that exceed the minimum requirements of the NFIP. Typically like 1 foot freeboard above the minimum base flood elevation, issues like that. For each point that the city receives below a 10, flood insurance policies are discounted by 5%. The city currently has a rating of 9, so flood insurance policies in Riviera Beach receive a 5% discount. We are now being audited by the Insurance Services Organization and are trying to get a better rating for the city. As part of that, contact with the State Floodplain Management Office has reviewed our ordinance and has recommended these changes. They have helped write these changes to meet some minimum requirements that the NFIP made. So there's some minor, very minor changes to the ordinance that I'd like to go on over. I forgot to use mine. I forgot to keep up. Do I use the green or the red one? So some of the changes include just cleaning up some definitions. The NFIP came up with some new definitions, and so they recommended that we clean up a couple of our definitions. They recommended for accessory buildings that there's an exception that accessory buildings do not need to meet the minimum floodplain elevation, but they're limited in size and they can only be used for parking and storage, not living areas. Only parking and storage. So we've added that. And then they've altered the section for the minimum elevation of manufactured homes by removing the option to do a 36-inch high piers, which has very little effect on the homes in the mobile home parks in Riviera Beach. So we fixed those up, and then the rest was just changing some language and repealing Chapter 25, Exhibit A, because all of those regulations in Exhibit A are now contained in the building code and are redundant. And that's all these changes are. And staff recommends approval of the new ordinance amending the floodplain regulations.
Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and open questions up to our boards, starting with Board Member Gallen.
No question.
Okay. Deferring to myself, you mentioned that we are reducing the point by going down from which tier to which tier. I know it's in my notes, but I don't have it at memory. We're at what step?
We're currently at 9.
We're at a 9, and our goal is to get to where?
We're trying to get to a 7.
We're trying to get to a 7. On a scale, is that a moderate goal? Is that an aggressive goal?
Currently, that's an achievable goal. Every time we have an audit with the ISO, we're going to hopefully keep reducing that. But there's a lot of education that needs to be done, a lot of programs that need to be implemented, and because you get audited for these items, and there's a whole score sheet on all the different items that you can implement. So I've only been here a short time, and in the short time that I've been here, we all of a sudden had an audit come up very quickly. So this was a goal that I thought was achievable, but we hope to keep improving and eventually get down to a 5.
Okay, would you say the best in class is a 5?
There are a few local municipalities that have gotten all the way down to a 3, which is very difficult to do. But I think for right now, a 7 is a good goal, and eventually getting down to a 5 would be very good.
With your tenure here and in the future, have you mapped out the time frame in which you're going to reach a 5?
I have not given a time frame on that.
Okay.
But each time we'll get audited by the ISO every 3 years.
And the reason that I'm asking that question, because there are benefits to our residents that when it moves from where we are now to our goal of a 7, and ideally to a 5, and specifically to a 3, there are financial benefits to our residents. In this time and age when insurance companies randomly drop their customers, and you got to go find someone else, and now you got to pay a higher insurance fee, and this is a benefit to present to a carrier, or even your decision to go with the carrier that recognize that we as a city have made an achievement to move from where we are to a 7 to a 5 and hopefully to a 3. And those cost savings are just, from what I understand in the documentation, could be relatively significant. You know, depending on how much your house costs, that can range from thousands to tens of thousands in savings. So I like to see that we have aggressive plan, ideally in a short time frame, to get to that number 5, because it benefits our customers, but also it says a lot about how we manage this process as a city. And once you go through the audit and we move from where we are to a 7, how long does it take for that new status rating to be effective and carriers pick up on it as we as residents go through the process of renewing or buying insurance? Flood insurance, I guess.
I'm not sure the exact, I believe it happens very quickly. When the new flood maps came in, the carriers sent notices out within a week. And so I believe it happens very quickly, but I'm not positive of that answer.
Okay. All right. Those are all my questions.
I just want to ask a question. On my second job, I travel around the city a lot within Riviera Beach, Jupiter, Palm Beach Gardens, Lake Park, and the west side of Jupiter and Tequesta. And in seeing some of the homes, the mobile homes as you addressed, even though they are mobile homes, they are not technically mobile. Most of them are, their foundation is on the ground. And are those homes, the ones who are subject to, of course, to floods, are they obligated to move these homes up to a certain level? That's what our rules are for, right? To have them moved up to a certain level, so it'll be for safe and for insurance purposes, correct?
Yeah, this will affect new homes that are moved in,
Okay.
homes that are being replaced, or homes that incur substantial damage, which has a definition of 50% of the assessed value of the home. If the damage is that much, then they would have to raise it.
Yeah. And at that point, if someone has something now, is it the responsibility of that property, or is it the responsibility of the owner to have that? Who will have the responsibility for that?
It would be the owner of the home on like a leased lot.
Right.
Yes.
Right. On this lot. So it'd be the
Right.
owner of that. Okay. So to make sure. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Mr. Moetti?
So does the insurance benefit, does this apply to city property too?
It applies to all flood insurance policies in the city, which there are currently approximately 5,000 flood insurance policies in the city. The savings per point, I believe it was approximately $66,000 in savings for every point that we get off of our rating for savings in the city.
Okay, so basically we're looking around 132,000 in total if we get to the 7?
Right.
Okay, and that's across everything.
Well, that would be for all properties that have flood insurance. There are a lot of properties that have flood insurance that are not in a special flood hazard area, so it saves them. You're required to get flood insurance if your property is located in a special flood hazard area and you have a mortgage with a federally financed bank like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Other than that, you're not required to get it, but you're encouraged to get it.
Okay. Yeah, well, again, I think this is another great initiative. I mean, you're talking about $130,000 just, in rewording things so that the insurance company gives us a better rating. And I would like to see this, I think this could be something that we could possibly save in other insurance areas. So I like this initiative, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Public comments? I don't see anyone here. None. Okay, so we're going to move on, and we're just going to go on to a vote. If I can have a board member make a motion to adopt the recommendations by staff on agenda item B.
So move.
Second.
And we will have a roll count.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Moetti Nubi,
Yes.
Evelyn Harris Clark.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Okay, all right. Let's go on to item number 9, which is the workshop item, the template, which is going to be presented by Board Member Moetti.
Okay, so per our last meeting, and I'll just refer to the page 62 of the notes, Chairperson Clark delegated to me the task of coming up with an initial template for surveys that whenever a developer comes into the city, could we have a standardized template that they use to survey the local residents near their proposed project. So I just went in ahead and created I tried to make it as simple as possible because I didn't want to have something that was overbearing to the residents. Obviously, if we're going to have developers knocking on people's doors, then we don't want them to be overloaded with, intimidating paperwork. And, so we would want the developer to, create a very simple summary of their project and, be able to discuss it. And, really just, after they give a summary, then have the resident, I made it simple, a smiley face, a straight face, or a frowning face, and just, say how they feel about the project. And then I added another question at the bottom that, we can always alter this, where, just ask, how do you feel about the safety of your area? So, let's say if they survey 30 residents and 80% of the people are, feel great about the safety in the area, then, that could be information that we can relate to the police department, or if they don't feel safe, then, we might be able to allocate manpower to that area just to ensure. So it's just another way for us to kind of make sure that we're, it's a way to kind of outsource some of the mood of the community and get the developers to do the work for us without, and I also think it's kind of a goodwill thing because, if developers are genuinely interested in, helping the community grow, then they ought to be willing to do some survey work to make sure that people are okay with the project and, also help the city, gauge the temperature of the residents. And, at the end, I pretty much just had a place where the the responder to the survey could, put their address and then sign and date it. So I wouldn't say this is an official survey, but I think it's a good start. And I have this in a Google Docs. So if we want to make any adjustments to it, it wouldn't be a problem. And also, if so any questions or concerns?
No, I think this would be a great.
Let's have staff come up, because staff is going to help implement this, so we'll have our staff come up. Is there any way that we can put the template survey on the screen so the public can see it by any chance? Is that possible?
I don't think we have that capability. Walter, do you have a scanner back there or a projector? I don't think we do have that ability,
Okay,
Madam
so
Chair.
let me, Mr. Moiti, could you just verbally go through the template so the audience can just hear it, starting at the top?
Absolutely. So, at the top, we have the city seal with the, and it's labeled Planning and Zoning Survey Template. And the first section will be a summary of the proposed project. And this will be where the developer will basically summarize the project. And after they summarize the project, there is a section that asks, what are your feelings about this proposed project? And it's a very simple, there's 3 check marks. You can check mark the smiley face, the straight face, or the frowny face. And the next section asks, how do you feel about the safety of your area? And again, you have a smiley face, straight face, or a frowny face. And then below that, you just have the address of the responder. And then there's a place where you can sign and date. And that's it.
Okay, hopefully that gives our audience a visual. And let's start with staff, because let's get your feedback on being able to help the applicants out so that they are not coming here and we have to ask them, did they initiate this process? And most importantly, I think, versus the applicant creating their own template, because it's always going to be biased and slighted to their direction because they created it. We want it to come from the city of Riviera Beach and to be valuable information that not only staff, but we here as a board, we got some feedback as the applicant is before us, and we can look at the residents, what they actually feel and think, or more importantly, if the applicant is doing this, they're getting the feedback and they're going to know what the challenges are before they come here to this body or to the staff and resolve it before it even gets to us. So how easy would this be to integrate into the applicant package?
So is your intention to have this, when the applicant comes in and applies, for us to ask them to go out and, we already tell them to speak to the neighbors, so you're asking us to have them go out and try to do some surveys?
They speak to the neighbors. We don't get that information. We don't know who they talked to. We don't know when they did it. We don't have any information. They can speak all day long to someone, but it means nothing if we don't know where they went, how long they were out there, who they talked to, what feedback they're bringing back. I mean, they can easily come back without documentation and stand at the podium and say, oh, we talked to 5 people, and they feel really good about that. Well, those were the 5 people that were at home. What about the 25 people that were at work?
Correct, and I will remind the board that we do mail notices to everyone within 300 feet. We also require those big signs that you've seen to be posted on the properties, and that provides people an indication that a hearing or a project is underway. If there's a survey going on, a lot of times people will see the stakes out there, and people will call us and say, hey, I saw some people out there working, can you tell me what's going on? So there are residents that already will contact staff and find out what's happening, what's going on. They will find out about the project from the notice that we send out. I can confer with legal and talk about how to incorporate it into our process. I'm not sure that we can make it, we can encourage people to do it, but depending on what level of success they have, you know, that's not something that we could necessarily penalize someone for. You never know if people are at work
Right.
or not at work.
And I don't
that
want
type
to
of
use the
thing.
word penalize, because the bottom line is that they're going to come before us, and we're going to turn around and we're going to ask them what is exactly on this template. Give you the example of the applicant that came before us, and their building was going to be right in front of a daycare. Pretty sure that if there was some lot more open dialogue between that applicant and the owner of that business, if that were my business, I certainly would have asked the question about what was being built on the other side and how that was going to impact the safety of my children and what it was going to do to my property, et cetera. I think this opens up a little bit more fairness and balance of the applicant not taking us as a city, this board, and our community for granted. Yes, you do your job of encouraging, but the bottom line is you've encouraged, and then they show up, and we turn around and send them right back to do this.
Well, again, we're going to have to talk about this internally about our process. I think that it's not what we say, it's how we say it. And so I can tell people to please go out and do the survey, but again, people may have variable results for lots of different reasons, right? Some people, when I'm home alone, you can knock on my door. I don't answer the door if I'm not expecting someone, you know, so if someone's surveying my neighborhood, they're not going to reach me that way. But if I get a postcard in the mail and I have an opinion, I'm either going to send a letter in, send an email to staff, or come to a meeting. So I think that, you know, if we incorporate it into the package and the process, that's great. But I encourage the board to, you know, understand that you might get varying levels of responses, and you cannot just read into that it's a deficiency on the part of the developer. For example, the daycare was aware of the project that went in next door, right? They received a notice. All of our plans are online. So if somebody gets a postcard and calls me up and says, Miss Savage Dunham, I got a postcard, what is this about? Obviously, I would take the time to speak with them. If they wanted to come in, they could meet with me. But now I can also say, if you'd like, you can go right online. I'll show you where, and you can take a look at the plans. You got a notice because we're having a meeting, and we really want your input. So if you have concerns, support, or lack of support, we want to know. And so we have those conversations now. We can continue to have them. But sometimes a lack of response from the public, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a deficit on the part of the developer. And I just want to make that clear because, you know, sometimes you have great results with things and sometimes you don't, and it doesn't mean that people aren't trying. And I find for the most part, the developers that do come to the city work with us closely, and if they don't, you know that based on our staff report.
Mm-hmm. I think grassroots work, even though we send out notices, if we are 80% tenant occupied renters, notifications go to the owners. Owners are in I don't know, somewhere over in Europe. They can care less. But the resident getting something like this, if a developer went and just had a few representatives go and survey, I think that would be important. I want to give the example of the applicant that came who wanted to open up a daycare. They would not exactly have come here if I had not gone into that neighborhood and start knocking door to door and talking with the residents about the project that some were not even aware of, some were, and as a result of me encouraging them to come if they had any positive or negative concerns to come to the P&Z board meeting, which they did do and express their enthusiasm. So again, I think this sort of grassroots is good if we can incorporate it in the package. If it's not mandatory, we're just simply saying that it's here, and we encourage, depending upon that project, to use it. It's only applicable in certain instances.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I just add on something?
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to say that, obviously, since we are kind of experimenting here, so, I agree that, I'm not saying that we make this a requirement. I do think that it should be something that, is an optional suggestion, because one thing that they need to consider is that, let's say, that there is controversy around the development. Let's say that there's a resident that comes in and they have a big issue with the project, and we don't know how. And in those moments, I think that if they do a survey, then this will allow us to make a more, educated decision. Versus, because sometimes people come in project, it sounds great, and then, we hear somebody and they say, they have a negative opinion. But, so what I would suggest is that if a developer wants to just go beyond a reasonable doubt, then this is actually helpful for them. So we're really just trying to give them to me, this is an optional template that for the board, I think it's just helping. It's help us help you. So if in case of controversy, then this helps us make a better decision. But we're not mandating or requiring anything. But I just wanted to try to create something that I think could really streamline and I think can help everybody. It's just depending on. So I'm not saying if they don't do it and there's no controversy, then I'm not going to penalize somebody for doing it. But I mean, hey, if there's if you don't do it and there's controversy and, or something happens, then I'll ask, well, did you do this? And it's there, and why not?
Good point. Mm-hmm.
So, again, I'm not sure, Ms. Savage, what you have to do just to make this as a part of the package in terms of being a useful tool, depending upon what the project is.
We'll talk about it internally and talk about different options to try to achieve what your goal is and see what fits in. And we can report back to you. I need to talk to Mr. Sermons and, talk to the team and look at the scope of our authority and then give you a full answer, which I'm happy to do.
Sure. It's just that in the past, this body can say, since we've been on board, we've always had this sort of questioning to the applicant and deferred for them to go back and to survey the community. I think it benefits them that they know what they're up against and can resolve that, which in one case, I think it was maybe about a year and a half, almost a year and a half ago, it worked out very favorably for this applicant because the residents were against their project, and they went back out and did this, spoke to more people, and clarified the ramifications of good or bad, what their project was going to do to their neighborhood. And after they knew what they were up against, they resolved it and were able to come back to us, as well as the residents come back to us and said, we had open dialogue. And there were some challenges. But now, because of them taking this initiative, we would like for the board to approve the project.
Duly noted.
Any other comments?
Just to reiterate what you guys just stated, I had a person come around to my neighborhood, to come to my house with something like this also, and I think the best thing that it did for me was I got a chance to talk to that person about what the product was that they had, be able to ask questions myself, even though I might not have been educated on what they were actually doing, but I got a chance to ask my own questions to be able to kind of get clarification on what they were doing. And I think that's the best thing that these companies can do, is to identify what their environment is, what neighborhoods they're in, talk to the people. Sometimes they may have a problem, and the people inside the community will probably have an answer for them. and it can actually assist them in coming up with solutions for those, for those problems that they may have. It could be something dealing with noise. It could be something dealing with something that they may see, or something may not be tall enough, or maybe another fence or something like that. But now your customers, your neighborhood people in that area now can actually help you, like a way to say, help yourself in making it easy. So then when you come to the board, then guess what? You don't have the issues now that are facing you. You don't have to go back out and ask these questions, because guess what? Everybody be on board at least, or have a common understanding. So yes, I agree with her. I think this is a really good idea, not to hurt the company coming in, but just to assist them, and not to punish them for anything. Because like you said, if you don't get the proper response, you don't want that to seem like it's a bad thing or not. But at least it's something that gives us some groundwork to where we start from. And then, like I say, if it helps out 4 or 5 people in the neighborhood to understand what's going on, those 4 or 5 people can help out that company or that organization at the same time. So we can use that as a tool.
And maybe the applicant doesn't know that they have the flexibility to even do something like this. So that they're not surprised if the board is asking them questions that we do our research. We walk the neighborhood, we look at the properties, the projects. I talk to the business owners, I talk to the residents. So I'm trying to get a temperature read and understanding. But I know to do that because I sit on the P&Z board. But an applicant may not, depending on who they are, may not know that they got the flexibility to kind of circumvent and make the process a little bit easier for them and for us. And again, we want them to help themselves, but we also want to help too.
And one other comment, Madam Chair.
Sure.
And the only other comment is just regarding the second question about the safety in the area. One thing I noticed from being a landlord in this city is that there is a hesitancy sometimes for residents to speak up about safety, and I think there's still I don't feel like people really have an outlet that they feel comfortable talking about. And I do think that by adding a writer question on there, it provides a way for people to kind of indicate to their elected leaders in a safe way where they don't feel like they're exposed. And and I think this information is very important. I actually feel that there are a lot of people who are very hesitant. They don't know how to express how they feel about their area. So even beyond just approving the project, I do think this gives us an opportunity to really feel like how are the residents feeling. And so if we're getting information about a certain area, then this kind of creates a way for even our our law enforcement locally to understand how do residents really feel. Because believe it or not, for what it's surprised me the level of things that will occur that people will not say anything. And I'll just let you read through the lines on that, but I do think it's something that that this is just an opportunity for it to maybe try to create another pipeline to really connect with residents and and make them feel safer.
I think that's a good point. Walter, are we still being recorded? Okay, great. So I want to caveat what Board Member Mueti has said and address this to our residents that regarding any sort of unusual activity that you deem not safe, our city council, our mayor, and many of our residents are asking our residents to come to city council and help us fix these crime activities that are occurring in our neighborhood. We can do what we can do on the P&Z board to help facilitate that information to our elected officials, but we are asking that you come to city council meeting and talk about what is going on in your neighborhood And also, if you have recommendations to our elected officials, to give them some sort of guidance as what is going on and what you would like to see them do to help eradicate the problem. And I'm going to really use myself as an example. When I moved into my neighborhood, I don't think I've ever seen the type of criminal behavior that I have ever seen in my entire life. But what I did do is make it a point to communicate to my elected officials, to our city staff, our police department, our clean and safe department, and we all worked in combined unison to understand what was going on in my particular area and develop a plan to eradicate it. And I am very, very proud and happy to say it took 4 years, but my street is one of the safest streets in Riviera Beach. Safe enough that if we accidentally leave a window open, nobody's breaking into our neighborhood. Those problems are all gone. We have children that walk down the streets. We have families that walk down the street. People entertain in their front yard, their backyard, and we often have people coming into our neighborhood asking, "Can I buy your home?" It makes a difference with us as residents getting together, pulling together, and working with our elected officials to get rid of these problems. It can be done. So I'm off of that particular soapbox. If anyone else has anything else to add, then we will move on with the agenda. Okay, hearing none. Let's see. We have any correspondence from staff?
No, ma'am.
None? Okay. Any items regarding upcoming P&Z board meetings? The next one is August 26th. Anything else to add?
So our next meeting is August 26th, and one of the projects that will be coming forward, I believe, is going to be having a community meeting August 3rd. When I get the flyer, I will share it with the board, and that's for a project in the downtown area for a medical office building on 47 and 55 West 14th Street. I believe. I'll send you the flyer. They went to the CRA. The CRA asked them to have a community meeting to make sure that the abutters were aware of the project. The applicant is preparing to do that. As I said, I believe it's scheduled for August 3rd. I've asked the applicant when he gets the flyer to provide it to me for our file. He will be holding the meeting, but I advised him that we'll need some summary minutes and a sign-in sheet from that community meeting to incorporate into the P&Z packet so that when the applicant comes before you, you already know what's transpired. So that project will be on August 26th. Staff is also working on another regulation change pertaining to the abandonment of rights-of-ways. And we're hopeful that it will be ready in time to come before you to talk about it on August 26th. And the intent in that is that more and more businesses are coming to the city and asking to abandon streets. And, you know, I'd like to take these 4 blocks. And the county has a process where if an entity chooses to request to abandon a right-of-way, the applicant pays a privilege fee to the county, which is 80% of the assessed value of the land of the right-of-way. So in other words, when they abandon a right-of-way, they're creating more area for their project, right? So our city leadership has asked staff to look at that. Mr. Sermons asked my team to take a look at it, so we are. And we hope to be, we're still working on it, so I don't want to give away anything because it's not all figured out. But we hope to bring another code change before you for your consideration and then to the city council so that as people develop in the city, the city is certainly generating whatever revenue that it should for kind of this give and take dance that we do. So we're working on that for August 26th, and there's an affordable housing project coming in down in the CRA, and that we think is going to come forward on August 26th. So we should have 3 robust discussions for you at that meeting. So we're very excited. They should all be 3 very good discussions.
Okay, for the community event that's taking place on August 3rd, is it a protocol that P&Z members either go as a P&Z person or to sit in on it, or just as a resident?
If you choose to go as a resident, you're welcome to, but I would encourage you to remember open meeting law and think about, do you have a quorum there? Plus, this is a project that's going to come before you to deliberate on here. We certainly wouldn't want you to engage in a dialogue that would make it seem as though you prejudged a project before you had all of the information. So the applicant is going to be presenting their information, but I would tell you that for you to opine or deliberate on a project, you'd want to certainly have staff's information and the full file. So, I would say if you choose to go and be a fly on the wall, you're more than welcome to, but I would encourage you not to provide opinions, or if you have a quorum, you really need to be very cautious, maybe not say anything.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, with that being said, I'm sorry?
This is still public comments, correct?
No.
I mean, not public comments, but for board comments.
Well, I was getting ready to open it up to board
Got it.
comments. Okay,
Sorry.
so I'm opening up board comments, starting Mr. Gatlin.
No comment.
Okay, no comment. Mr. Wiley?
Alrighty, I apologize because I saw her say the new board meeting was August 26th, so I thought we had already skipped that part. I just want to say one thing that I spoke of in the meeting last night for our city meeting. We had a new person who moved into my neighborhood across the street from myself, and we kind of gave her a welcoming, hello, how you doing, everything, gave her something just to welcome to the neighborhood. And she was moving from over in the 10th Street, from Craig Avenue I area. And we were just having a casual conversation. Her husband is a plumber and everything, so if we ever need anyone in the neighborhood ever needing help, he was the guy for that. Then we got to the conversation where she was saying that, this bottom part here where the dead end is, it's a leak, there's a water leak there. And it's been leaking forever. So we hop in our car and we drive over to that area, and there's this little green stump, and this water's coming out of it, and it's turning colors or whatever, and it's running straight into the drain, down into the sewer. And then she proceeded to say, yeah, it's been like that for probably about 8 or 9 months, and it's just running constantly. So we called up Cedric, Public Works and everything, and they got it taken care of. What I want to say to the public right now, who, especially for everyone's listening, if something like that ever happens in our city, please come to City Hall or speak to someone and get that done immediately. She said she was living there at that time, and she knew from that time to where she moved into where she is now, it had been 8 months. We don't know how much longer that's been running prior to that. And the water was just coming out, and it's like a little swamp area, and you can see the water running right into the doggone sewer. And I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And like I said, the fellas from Public Works went out there and got it all fixed up and everything. But I just want to tell the public, please, if something like that ever happens, please let someone at the city know, call up City Hall, get in contact with your officials, someone, and get that done as soon as possible. Because that could have been the reason why we have the fluctuation in our water bills. Because if that water's running constantly like that, I can imagine what the bill will come from or whatever. So I haven't got back with the guys from Public Works to find out what that actually was. Was it something coming from pressure, or was it just a water leak or whatever like that? I'll probably talk to them tomorrow. But the water leak was pretty bad to where you can just see the water just running right down the road and then right into the sewer. And she said she knows been doing that for 8 months, just to her knowledge. So please, community, if you ever see something like that, again, whether it comes to crime, whether it comes to anything else as far as safety in our community and the welfare, especially when it comes to financial, please inform someone at the city.
Mr. Moiety?
No comments.
Okay, all right. And at this point, since we have completed our agenda, I ask a board member to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.